let's go ahead and get started. And this is going to start with our agenda. So like any journey or search or safari or whatever you want to call it, you got to prep for it, right? So what prep work do we need for our review response tour? Then we're going to start the search for the perfect review response. We're going to talk about capturing guest feedback and sentiment, so important right now for setting proper expectations. Avoiding those review response roadblocks. We understand this is not everyone's favorite thing to do, is sit down and respond to reviews. We love it here. Like I said, we've done it over a million times, but maybe not a hotelier's favorite job to do. So there are some roadblocks we can try to avoid. We're going to talk about showcasing our review response. And finally, perhaps chartering an expert review response tour guide. So let's jump into it and start with prepping our review response tour. So like I said, safari journey, we got to know what we're looking for. And in terms of review response, we're talking about people that are leaving reviews and people that are reading the reviews, because if they're most likely reading the reviews, they're going to be reading the responses. Now, this was some very, very interesting data that was pulled from a recent Trust You study about booking behavior and 2022 reputation consumer research. And it found that actually, this was very surprising to me, 66% of millennials and Gen Zs are writing these online reviews, and only 45% of baby boomers and Gen X leave after the stay. So you'd be surprised to think that this younger generation is actually doing the majority of review and feedback leaving. And this makes perfect sense for the review readers out there, right? 84% of young travelers frequently read reviews before booking, and only to 67% of older travelers. And really the main piece of that is this. This has become more accessible for reviews and travel and researching and inspiring us for our events. So it's easier than ever to type and leave a review, but also scroll and reading these reviews. So it's very, very important right now. And that's why you guys are here. So let's talk a little bit more about, what these generations are looking for when reading hotel reviews. Number one thing, Wi-Fi for you, the younger travelers. Makes total sense. Again, just talked about how attached we are to our cell phones, but think about everyone likes to talk about this bleisure explosion that happened during the pandemic, that business leisure travelers starting to blend. When was the last time, think about this, when was the last time you wrote a review response featuring your Wi-Fi or talking about the Wi-Fi at the property, right? Maybe not something that comes to mind, but certainly something that the younger travelers, especially if you're targeting them, are going to be looking for. Family-friendly options, again, if they're bringing the family with them for these bleisure trips, this is a great example to implement these things into your review responses to help target travelers. Look at the baby boomers and Gen X side. Cleanliness is still number one. Might be some carryover from the pandemic. They were a little bit more cautious in coming back to travel, but cleanliness is still a top priority for them, as well as hotel location and safety. So as we start to think about how we're curating and crafting these responses, keep these topics in mind if you're trying to target one segment over another. So this is our first kind of little interactive place here in the presentation. And I'd like everyone to kind of maybe point with your finger on where you think how many reviews travelers are reading before making a booking decision. So we got this 1 to 10. Now, those that only read or scan reviews, they're actually looking at 7.5 reviews before making a booking decision. Now, the average is 8.7, and those that are writing the reviews, they're reading even more, closer to 10. So when we look at this statistic, we're really saying that we've got about 7 to 9 reviews and responses to make an impact. And this is where I really talk to hoteliers about asking these questions. Are services promise being kept? So if we have a promise back in review number 2 here about talking about, we're going to be better with our cleanliness, the hot water is, an issue, we're going to work on it, and we see those same issues arrive in review number 6 and 7, that's not a promise being kept. We're telling our guests, but most likely potential travelers are going to see that and say, this is an issue that has not been corrected and it could impact conversion. how much can we promote our property features, right? So one of my favorite things to do is ask what makes your property special and unique. And most hoteliers have a great answer. Let's take the example of a breakfast. We have gluten-free options. We have this bacon and omelet station that you have to try. And I'll go to their reviews or review sites, and I'll see a lot of feedback about their breakfast, but in the responses, there's mentioning nothing that they just told me. This is a great time to tell your story, especially these positive reviews that you're seeing there. So how can we set proper expectations to arrival? This is the number one reason while we're responding to negative reviews is proper expectations at the hotel are not being set online before a guest arrival. This is so important, and we're going to talk about this. This is going to be a big theme of this webinar. And what can we do to educate our guests about our hotel, right? We've all got that one thing at the hotel. Maybe it's noise, maybe it's a parking fee, a pet policy. What time's check-in? When's breakfast? These are all policies that if we use smart review response writing, we can educate our guests through our review responses versus waiting for them to come to the front desk and ask us. We can be ahead and set those proper expectations we were just talking about. So this is what we use, right? For our TMG response partners, if you've been in our master classes, if you've been in our boot camps, I've shown you this a lot, but it's so important. So whether it's with TMG and our review guidelines, you have to have a place where your voice is put down on paper or online. The goal of this really should be is that you can hand this from one employee to the next employee and that voice stay consistent. Think about the way that you intro your review responses to the way you sign off. If you're showing inconsistency on those 7 to 9 review responses, it really impacts the brand and the story that you're trying to tell online. People are looking for consistency now, and especially a place like a hotel stay, which is so important. We're looking for consistency, and the expectations are just so high. So take a screenshot of this. One of the things I really want to talk about is how you want your hotel name to appear in reviews. People always think, I'll just say my property name like this versus this. One of the things we're talking to, other than the guests that left the review and prospective travelers, is Google, right? We want to make sure that we have that consistency in our hotel's name. It helps send information to Google and gets you higher up on searches and gives you more relevant information. So make sure you're repeating these things back to your guests during review responses. And finally, I mentioned it in the last time, what makes your property special or unique? These need to be in those 7-9 responses if you're looking to make an impact on conversion. So the search begins, right, for the perfect response. Again, I'm going to have everyone kind of point on the screen. Where do you think, when should you respond to a review online? Now, your guest, according to that Trust You survey, they're expecting a response, whether it's negative or positive, within 4 days. Our brand has a little bit higher standard, that 72 hours before, obviously, some brand fines start to incur. Travel Media Group really likes to live in that 24 to 48 hours. We even have some properties that we've gotten to the single digits. Places like Google, TripAdvisor, OTAs, they will tell you exactly when a review is left, and your guests will be looking at when that review is and if it has a response or not. So we want to definitely, beat the expectations of the brand, but we want to blow out the expectations of our guests when we're leaving that response. So something to keep in mind when we're talking about timing. So different ratings mean different objectives, right? So depending on what star rating you have, you really want to, have a different objective for each one. A 1-star really should be to resolve issues and showcase commitment to service. Obviously, we hate negative reviews. We wish we didn't have to do it. But if it's the hoteliers that think of these 1- and 2-star reviews as an opportunity to showcase commitment to service, that really helps, because If we just have positive reviews all the time, or we're trying to market or promote our property even off a negative review, it comes off disingenuous, and your traveler is going to see that. In fact, that's proven with this stat where it says 62.4% of all respondents believe that reviews, including positive and negative feedback, are the most trustworthy. So we love those 4 and 5-star reviews, but really that true feedback of maybe some negative aspects and positive aspects, that's warranted as the most trustworthy for guests that are prospective travelers that are reading your reviews. So we've got a big opportunity with review response, because obviously they are going to be taking note of those reviews. We can start by saying, we're disappointed or to hear about your experience for those 1 stars. Those 5 stars, we're delighted to hear that you enjoy your stay with us. But really that 3-star, where we should really lean in. You know, we appreciate you sharing some of the aspects of your experience. We strive to improve, but we are thrilled to hear. And then that we talk about that promotion, which we're about to get into. So different objectives for different ratings. I think this is a great way to kind of go into the mindset of responding to a review. And we're going to talk about some of those in capturing guest feedback and sentiment. So this is typically the biggest thing that we see is responding to a negative review. This is where hoteliers, I would say, spend a majority of their time. They want to make sure they get this right, especially a negative review. Some hotels even think that they're only going to respond to their negative reviews. I'm gonna show why that actually is a big mistake here in a second. So when we're thinking about responding to a negative review, I want to continue on this really theme of a journey and a path. And I think the best way to describe this is kind of finding a path to resolution. And I've kind of broken this up into 4 distinct categories why a guest will leave a negative review. 1, I mentioned at the top of this presentation, expectations were not met. Number 1 reason, expectations have certainly changed since COVID. They're at sky high right now with inflation and the rates that some hotels are charging. So we want to make sure that proper expectations are set to arrival. So something like this could say, you know, I expected more from the hot breakfast, right? Everyone has an opinion on our breakfast. Really, finding the path to resolution there is, what can we do in that response to set proper expectations for the next person? So if they expected more out of that hot breakfast, in that response, we should be talking about what there is in that breakfast in specific, so that the next guest that comes in is not having the same feedback and experience where their expectations were failed to be met. The next is preferences were not met. And this is a big one and a tough one, but most prospective travelers are going to understand. And the example I put with this one are the beds were way too hard. You know, so in our resolution there, we can say, you know, we apologize that the beds were not to your liking or were not to your preference. What we really, that resolution that we're trying to find in this example would be that this is a preference, and that some of our guests prefer it this way and some of them not. Guests will be a lot more forgiving if that's the case. So trying to, again, lean into that preference not being met and finding resolution there. Guest misunderstanding policy, right? What's one of the biggest policy changes that we've seen since COVID? It's that coming into your room and cleaning it, daily housekeeping service, right? We've seen a lot of hotels go the way of, you know, you're going to need to request that in order for it to be made. But maybe a lot of guests don't know that that's a policy change. So guest misunderstanding policy, they never cleaned my entire stay. This is a huge opportunity in the review response to explain what that policy is all about. Again, we talked about it earlier, educating our guests to make sure the next guest knows about this policy. That would be the goal there. And then finally, just an unlucky stay, right? I've worked at multiple hotels before, and we've always had that guest come in that maybe you send them to one room and they don't like it. You happen to pick another and it's not to their preference. They don't like it. You know, we don't like to call them picky guests, but you guys probably know example or situation or two. My neighbors kept me up all night, right? A 1-star. Really nothing that you know is kind of out of your control in this regard. And this is kind of your get out of jail free card. It's really kind of an apologize and we'll do better next time. Now, within those 7 to 9, you probably only get 1 or 2 of these before, guests are going to start to see through this. But this is the type of resolution that needs to be found and created during our review response. Now, what's one thing we do as hoteliers if we're responding to reviews? We see a 1-star, a 2-star, maybe we get mentally amped up or frustrated because, we had just worked an 8-hour shift behind the front desk. And now we get to a 5-star. We spend a lot of energy on that 1-star. We get to a 5-star and we say, you know what? This is great. They're happy. This should be a really easy response. And the hoteliers that are doing this out there, and I have fallen blame to this as well. This is a huge opportunity that's being missed. It's essentially a guest giving you a microphone to tell all the great things that they just said about you, and you just saying thank you, right? No kind of response. So now, instead of finding a path to resolution, we want to find a path to promotion. So let's talk about this location, right? It was close to everything. This is a great opportunity in the review response to say, we were so happy to hear that you enjoyed our close proximity to great shopping and fine dining and restaurants. We'll hope you come back and see the other attractions that we have in the area. This is a great example of promotion when people are talking about your location. Breakfast. The breakfast was delicious. I talked about that example earlier. Explain what's going on at your breakfast. Do you have gluten-free options? Are there other things you've invested in? Locally sourced food. That is huge right now. Mention this stuff in your review responses, because if you're not saying it, then it's not going to be out there. Amenities, right? The pool was so relaxing. We're so happy that you enjoyed our pool and amenities. Hopefully you can come back and have one of our world-class pina coladas at the bar, or next time, make sure to visit our fitness center. This is finding a path to promotion here. And then finally, service. Our room was so clean. We have a commitment to cleanliness, and our housekeepers are 1 in a million to make sure every room is spectacular and clean for our guests. So take that baton that the guest gave you and run with it as far as your path to promotion. You've got 7 to 9 reviews to do it, so it's very important to do so. Now, I added this one in last minute because I get this question a lot, right? This really changed when character limits were dropped with Google's and OTAs. TripAdvisor still keeps them, but how do I respond to a review with little or no content, right? And this is where we really need to figure out what our competitive advantages are. We look in that 7 to 9 review response. Again, an easy way to do this, most of these sites, the first reviews that you're going to on your first page, there's 10 of them, right? So most likely you're just look at your first page, and then you actually create a path. So instead of finding a path to promotion, you create one. If you're looking for younger travelers, talk about your Wi-Fi, talk about the cleanliness. This hotel is great. Again, it's an amplifying microphone that it's a microphone or a megaphone that the guest is giving you, and you want to make sure that you're kind of spreading the word about your property. So this is something that I love. At Travel Media Group, obviously digital marketing, very complex. We like to take these kind of complex ideas and try to shrink them into something a little bit more manageable, a little bit more digestible. So this is something I picked up. I think we all remember back in school, kind of creating the sentence structure, right? Noun, adjective, verb. Well, this is really a structure of an effective review response. And if you follow this formula, more often than not, you're going to come to a good place when it comes to an effective review response. So let's start with a negative review. So intro, obviously, which we have in our hotel's voice and guidelines. We want to address the concern of the guests. We want to find a path to resolution. We just had some great examples of that. And we always want to invite back our guests. I'm going to show you why this isn't critical in a second, but 1-star or 5-star, we're always having an invitation back. We never want to make our guests feel uninvited, and we want to make sure that their stay, even if it was a 1-star, was the exception, not the rule at our property. And then finally, a closing. Now, if you have a positive, we're going to find that path to promotion that we talked about. We're certainly going to invite back that guest because those are advocates for our hotel now. And then we close again with that same signature and same way that we did. If we get that middle ground, which is very, very important because those are the most trustworthy, as we talked about, we really should follow the path of address the concern, resolution, promotion, always end the review response on a positive note, invitation, and closing. Now, this is where a lot of hoteliers think that the review response process ends, and there's one critical piece that we're missing here: sentiment analysis and data. You need to ensure that you are looking at the data and the feedback that guests are giving you in order to improve your guest experience. Hoteliers that are not doing this are missing out on a big opportunity because this is going to become an endless loop of just this negative review. The address the concern and resolution. Where if we don't figure out what's wrong and what guests are actually saying in order to fix it, it could have a major impact on your reputation. So let's talk about avoiding some response roadblocks. Like I said, this might not be your favorite thing to do when it comes to hospitality, right? Our job at hospitality people is people helping people, not necessarily responding to people behind a computer screen. And we've really uncovered two kind of roadblocks. Obviously, the mental strain and stress that it takes after a long shift in order to respond to sometimes not the greatest reviews. You know, positive reviews can feel great, but there's always those negative reviews, no matter what you're doing, that you still have to contend with. And we've seen this as a major stress on the hoteliers that we're working with. And then time, as I mentioned at the top of this presentation, you know, time is money in our industry. To sit down and be able to respond to reviews in consecutive, not a lot of hoteliers have that leisure. And we found this out with actually our own study, our 2023 review response partner study that we just conducted. And we found, like I said, the toll that these review responses are taking. We found that 81% of participants in this study feel like TMG responding to their hotels has reduced the level of stress in their position. So obviously a huge burden with review response on some of your employees. We know that we're going through an industry staffing shortage right now. It's impacting our entire industry. This certainly is something, so make sure you check on your employees that are responding to these reviews. And as far as time goes, we found that 98% of participants say that TMG's Respond and Resolve has actually given them more time to do other tasks at the property, like check rooms, talk to guests, train staff. And sales and marketing was another one we heard a lot of. If you're a DOS on this call, or even someone that a corporate DOS that oversees a lot of director of sales, how nice would it be to just be able to focus on sales and marketing versus review response? So some stress relieving and time saving tips: get your team involved, right? I talked about this. It really shouldn't be on the burden of one person. In fact, we have our own team of review response writers here in Maitland, Florida, and they don't do the entire review response process by themselves. We have multiple people at checkpoints actually writing and approving the reviews. So get your team involved. Maybe 1 week you have one associate writing, one approving, and vice versa. So switch off there. Make sure you're not responding after a long shift, and make sure you're in a very positive state of mind. The worst thing that you can do is become emotional on these responses. Certainly will impact the brand and story that you're trying to tell to prospective travelers that are reading that. And then create that resolution promotion playbook. So whether it's with the hotel's voice and guidelines, whether it's something that's physically written down, make sure you have an ability to find a resolution or promotion to any type of review that you're uncovering. Every single hotel, I guarantee on this call, has different strengths and weaknesses and opportunities where they know. Write down a guidebook, write down a playbook for whoever's responding to these reviews to make sure you're prepared, and that will certainly save you some time. So we've gotten to showcasing your response, right? So, you know, I asked this before, right? Why, Ryan, why in a negative review am I inviting somebody back, right? They've already told me they didn't enjoy their stay. Why would I invite them back? Well, here are two statistics that prove why this really does make an impact and why it's critical. 2 out of 3 authors of negative reviews are more inclined to return after a hotel addressed their issue in the response. And 96% of our participants in that R&R study think that custom tailored review responses have a positive impact on a guest impression of a hotel and actually increases your chances of booking. So this is super, super important here. And it really does make an impact. So we saw that structure of a review response itself, right? But let's kind of take a bird's eye view and look at the strategy as a whole. So, I've kind of outlined this and timelined this out as an effective review response strategy, not to an individual review, but a strategy in general. So reviews posted, response from the hotel, have a way to ID that sentiment, right? I explored how important and critical that data and sentiment analysis is. Maybe write that stuff down and do some sort of team meeting at the end of the week with some of that with some of that information and data attached to it. We provide trackers, we provide analytics and data in TMG's response in order to share that insights with you. And then have an approval process. Have somebody else taking a look. You would not believe sometimes grammatical errors or even the way that your voice might be coming off to one person might hit an ear a different way. So make sure you've got somebody approving. And this is Travel Media Group's review response strategy, right? So we've got response time from one of our professional writers here. We've got approval time from the hotel. And then we have that second quality audit that we were talking about, as well as pulling out all of those sentiments for our hoteliers. So, like I said at the beginning of this, we absolutely love, this is what we do. We provide review response on behalf of the world's most elite brands. As you can see, we've got some stats. 98% of participants feel like TMG's Respond and Resolve has had a positive impact on their business, and 96% would be likely or very likely to partner with us again. I will just end this webinar by just saying review response. We've had more interest in review response over the last 6 months than we had for the past 2 years. People are moving this review response task up the ladder now instead of down it. Maybe a couple years ago, you might have had a front desk manager or a front desk agent respond to these reviews. People are now starting to understand the revenue impacts with these review responses and how it is a strong sales and marketing tool for hotels.